Well, thank you everyone for being here today. As you can see, this is our stress management for veterinary well-being presentation. Thanks so much to Digitail for hosting me. For those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Melyssa Allen. I am a veterinary well-being coach. And as you can see here on the screen, I am a dog mom to the lovely Buddy. He is actually practicing some stress management now and getting his afternoon nap in. Really excited to be here with all of you. I am drawn to help support veterinary professional well-being because I'm a former animal trainer. So I worked for about 7 years as an animal trainer in different settings, from the Navy's Marine Mammal Program to SeaWorld Orlando. And then during my undergraduate experience at the University of Central Florida, go Knights, charge on, I actually was part of the Pre-Vet Society because I still was kind of playing around with the idea of going to vet school. So it also offered a lot of opportunity to connect with other animal lovers. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, I still work in human healthcare, providing support for health and well-being education to human healthcare providers. And I thought to myself, wow, a lot of this information would be really helpful for veterinary professionals to know as well, because I saw in my personal social media feeds, a lot of my friends and former coworkers were sharing the challenges that vet pros faced in the pandemic, but weren't receiving any of the same kind of recognition, support, or appreciation. So that's really when I decided to pivot my business, the Mind Body Thrive lifestyle, to be dedicated to veterinary well-being services. I'm also a cat mom now, so Jackie, our 6-month-old kitty, is probably wandering around here somewhere. At some point, he might make an appearance. But I also like to share a fun fact, and my fun fact that I decided to share for this presentation is that I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. I work really, really hard to try to give myself grace in a lot of different areas, but it's difficult because it's something that we learn over time. And so we also have to work to unlearn that. And it's relevant to this conversation today because a lot of the ways that we tend to cope with stress is learned either through observation of things like our parents or maybe mentors. And that's something that we usually take on ourselves. It's not something that we're typically taught throughout our elementary school education, right? It's kind of a learn as you go thing that we're hoping to try to change as newer generations emerge. So I wanted to open up, and feel free to comment in the chat. I love to make these presentations engaging and interactive. But what is stress? So thinking about maybe what stress is to you, but stress is a physical and psychological experience, and it's caused by a lot of different factors. And what I would love to know, speaking of making things interactive, is what does stress feel like to you? What does stress feel like to you? So if you want, you can scan the code that's on the slide here, or you can go to www.menti.com and use the code that's on the screen, and you could submit your answers anonymously. It's pretty fun. I'll actually do this myself as well, so we can all have a little bit of group experience and interaction here. What does stress feel like? This might cause you stress thinking about stress, right? But don't worry, we'll get to our stress management strategies. And let's see, you don't have to submit all three. I'm just gonna see it. Okay, there we go. So I know it's working. So once you submit your answers, they should show up in this word cloud here. There we go. Anxiety, worry, fear, lack of communication, tightness, tension, exhausting, being tired. Okay, yeah, we're starting to see some themes here, right? I put hungry because I tend to eat my feelings. So when I'm stressed, I am a stress eater. But yeah, we could kind of see that there's some common themes, but there's also some different things that were shared, and they're continuing to come through. I love it. Thank you all so much. Being tired of being tired. Yeah, I hear you on that one. So we can see that even though everyone experiences stress in some way, shape, or form in their lives, The experience of stress could be very, very different between each of us. So, we're going to first talk a little bit about stress education. So that way we have a better handle on understanding stress management strategies, how they work, why they work, and what might end up working best for you. I saw a couple more come through. Lots of tired, uncontrolled, ooh, burnt out, yeah, agitation. Oh, understaffed. I know y'all, you are seriously struggling with the staffing, and my heart goes out to you. I know what that's like in a different setting, but I know that that's a chronic issue that is being faced throughout the whole industry right now. So sending you all lots of hugs through that. I wish I could help with that. Unfortunately, that's not part of my job. All right. So, my job is to help support you in figuring out what kinds of tools and skills that you can bring into your life to better support you. Now, we know a lot of the issues that we face are very complex, right? It's not just falling on you to fix your burnout, right? It's not just falling on you what caused your burnout in the first place, right? There's organizational and systemic issues and environmental issues that are all contributing to these experiences of chronic stress. So what we want to do is we want to understand how our stress works so that way we can better manage it. And starting off here, understanding the physiology of stress, we have our fight or flight system, which is also known as our stress response. And then we have our rest and digest, which is our relaxation response. And both of these work in opposition of each other. It's like a seesaw, right? When one is activated, the other starts to get suppressed. So when we're in a situation causing us stress, that stress response is going to kick in, which is going to suppress our relaxation response. So if we can get better at starting to figure out ways to activate our relaxation response, it's going to help us suppress the stress response. Now, we might not be able to completely flip the switch, right, to where we have our relaxation response dominating and we're keeping our stress response at bay. It might not get to that point, but what we can do is to better help bring down that stress response a little at a time. And the reason that's important is because our stress response is like the gas pedal in our lives, right? It is that go, go, go. You're in danger. So you either have to fight or flee for your life. And that was really great and all when our ancestors were like, you know, in the face of a saber-toothed tiger, and they literally were in a life or death situation. And that stress response kicks in and keeps them safe. The problem that we find ourselves in right now is that when we maybe miss a work email or we end up screwing up on a procedure, our minds interpret that like a life or death experience and causes our stress response to activate. Now, is it a life or death experience for you? Probably not when you're missing a work email, right? It might feel like it, but it's not. And that's the issue, is because our body is then put under all of this stress from the stress response being activated, which includes like increased heart rate, your breathing rate speeds up, your blood pressure rises, you get really tense. And when your body stays in that state without activating or pumping the brakes, that's going to lead to some health concerns. So we want to be able to better identify how we can pump the brakes when we're noticing ourselves in that state of stress activation. And it takes practice, right? Because sometimes you may just be used to being stressed. Stress may actually be a habit for you, not of your own fault, just because of the world that we live in with this like hustle and grind culture. It's really not conducive to giving yourself permission or allowing you that space to really be in the rest and digest or relaxation response. And that's where it's going to help you recover from the stress that you're under. So what I want to take some time for us to do is to check out some of these symptoms of stress. So we have different categories, right? We have physical, emotional, and cognitive, which cognitive relates to our thoughts, so kind of like that mental status, and then behavioral. And you can see I've given a little bit of some examples in each of these different categories about how stress can show up for you. So when we were doing our little word cloud, we definitely saw some tension. I put that I'm a stress eater, so I put hungry in there. That tends to fall under behavioral. But I would love to know, as you're looking at this list, which ones do you identify with that now maybe you weren't able to think of it when we were doing the word cloud, but now that you're seeing it, you're like, ooh, actually, yeah, that is a stress symptom for me. I know difficulty focusing is one that comes up for me a lot too. And so feel free to drop in the chat which of these you tend to experience. And I will admit to, I am a shopaholic, y'all. Retail therapy gets me every time. And then it actually causes me more stress because financially, I don't need to be engaging in retail therapy, right? Okay, I've seen a few come through crying, the digestive upset. Oh, yeah, our tummies can get real angry when we're stressed. Sleep loss, yeah. The shopping too. I am right there with you. Isolating ourselves, yeah, that's also not helpful too, because we actually, when we're stressed, we should be connecting with people that can provide us support, right? But it may be tempting to kind of withdraw and isolate ourselves. So this is something, an activity that I would encourage you to do throughout your everyday experience and just kind of check in and be like, ooh, like I know I'm stressed, but what am I experiencing that is indicating this stress in my life? So one of the things that is pretty common amongst all of us humans are some of those physiological symptoms, right? That increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, blood pressure rises. And those are things that are going to happen because that's our body's response. But we also want to pay attention to how our minds respond, how we act when we're stressed, because that insight is what's going to allow you to start to take steps to better manage your stress. And even with some of these symptoms, they might not show up until you find yourself in a really elevated state of that stress response. And then all of a sudden you're having migraines. But what if you can catch your stress response before it starts to max out, right? What if you can catch it a little bit at a time, practice these stress management strategies proactively, and start to work it kind of down and backwards, right? So where you're starting to suppress the stress response and better activate that relaxation response. Sounds pretty good, right? I know I would love to be in a state where I'm more proactive about things that I can do to support my well-being. So hopefully that is helpful for you as well. Now, what happens if we're not managing our stress? A lot of times, stress is kind of viewed as the enemy, but in all reality, stress can actually be your friend. Like you can be besties with your stress. You just got to learn how to recognize it and respect it and appreciate it, but also to manage it and allow yourself that time to recover from stress. Because we have instances of acute stress, which is temporary, it's very short lived, it resolves very easily. One thing that is a common experience for a lot of us is probably traffic and experiencing stress in traffic. And then when you arrive at your destination, what ends up happening? You kind of like breathe a sigh of relief, right? And you like aren't white knuckling the steering wheel anymore. So that is an example of how acute stress shows up in our lives. It resolves. You're able to get yourself to a place where you're starting to recover from that stress that you were under. Now, chronic stress is more of the issue when it comes to our health, because if chronic stress goes unmanaged, it can lead to complex stress, which is one of the contributing factors to burnout. So if we're living in a state of chronic stress, where we're either not sure how we can manage it, or we're so busy trying to put out all the other fires in our lives that we're ignoring the stress that we're under, our bodies and our minds take a pretty significant toll. So like you can see here, for our mental health, it takes a hit when you're under chronic stress. That one, probably not as surprising, right? Stress is pretty much a mental and emotional experience, but it's also very physical too. So when we talked about the stress response being like the gas pedal, what happens to your car if you are just like pedal to the metal and running it without ever pumping the brakes? What's going to end up happening? Well, one, you're either going to run out of gas, or two, the engine might overheat. Like there's a lot of different factors that could go into your car running down because it's not meant to operate and perform at that level for extended periods of time. Our bodies and our brains, very, very similar. If we are not finding ways to incorporate those pockets of rest, to pump the brakes and recover from that physical, mental, and emotional stress that we're under, our bodies end up taking the hit. So chronic stress that goes unmanaged can lead to things like heart disease, high blood pressure. It can lead to eating disorders for women, menstrual problems, for both men and women, sexual dysfunction. Nobody wants that, right? That's a great stress relief. We don't want to have problems there. And then we could also end up developing skin and hair problems, gastrointestinal problems. Every part of our mind and body is impacted by stress. Now, that doesn't mean that stress ruins your life, right? And it doesn't mean that if you don't manage your stress, that you're going to end up with all of these chronic health conditions. It just leaves you more at risk of developing those chronic conditions. And there's actually a quote from Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She is a health psychologist. She has a really great TED Talk. I would highly recommend y'all check it out at some point. But she talks about the way that we think about stress actually changes our body's response to that stress. So instead of thinking that stress is bad for us, which is going to constrict our blood vessels, if we think about stress as our body is preparing us for this challenge, our body is working with us to help us perform at our best, that actually helps to release the blood vessels and they open up a bit more, which is going to lead to less likely heart conditions. There's a lot more science behind that, but just kind of the gist of it is the way that you think about your stress is going to affect your body's response to that stress. So instead of thinking about stress as the enemy, try to think about like, ooh, this is my body telling me that like there's a challenge that I'm about to face. There's something that it's preparing me to overcome. And the name of the podcast episode, it was actually a TED Talk. I want to say it was Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and I want to say it's like thinking about your stress or making your stress your friend. There it is, how to make stress your friend. Awesome. So yes, highly recommend watching that TED Talk. So knowing that the way we think about our stress is hopefully pretty empowering. And Mel Robbins wrote an awesome book. She wrote a lot of awesome books, but the one I'm thinking of in particular is the 5-second rule. And it actually tells us that our body responds the same way when we're nervous as when we're excited, right? So if we're nervous or anxious, our body is responding the exact same way as when we're excited. It's just the way that we're thinking about those experiences that changes the experience, right? So there is some power in being able to see these situations differently. So I wanted to throw in the piece about, yes, there are risks to our health when we're chronically stressed, but there are also things that we can do about it, which we'll be talking about shortly. Now, I mentioned checking in with your stress, and this diagram, with minus the exception of the digital buddy, is that Buddy is my little brand mascot. So I added those in there. But this stress continuum is a really useful tool that is taken from Stress First Aid, which was originally created for military populations to check in on their stress levels and to better take actions for themselves and for their coworkers to support when they're experiencing these different stress levels. So as you're looking at this diagram here, chances are you can probably indicate and check in where you're at on this stress continuum right now. And it's not like they're cut off categories, right? It's a spectrum. So you could be like bordering on green and yellow. You could be bordering on orange or red. So being able to take that into consideration, this is just a really helpful visual tool to allow yourself to better tap in and check in with your stress status. And at any time during the day, we could fluctuate all the way from green to red and back again, right? So hopefully kind of seeing this tool is a way that you can better conceptualize your experience of stress to then be able to take action to support yourself during those different experiences of stress. So what could that look like? Well, we want to be able to build our stress awareness because just like we shared earlier, stress shows up differently for each of us. That means the way that we manage our stress is probably going to look different. And the things that cause us stress could also look very different. When you think about two people who get involved in a car accident, one person may walk away just a little shaken up. The other person could potentially walk away developing PTSD. So it's not situational, it's subjective. So your personal experience is what contributes to the amount of stress that you end up feeling. So in this stress awareness activity, it walks you through being able to identify when you think about a time that you've been in the green zone, what thoughts and emotions do you notice? What behaviors do you notice? How are your relationships impacted? And what is happening in your body? And y'all don't have to try to write this down. I will send a PDF copy of the slides to Digitail so that way they can include it in the follow-up email. But really, I would encourage you to take some time to go through this stress awareness reflection and try to just help you better get to know your personal experience of stress in these different stress zones. Because from there, it's going to better inform what actions you can take to better manage your stress. Okay, so that brings us to what do you do to manage your stress? And we'll answer that in just a moment. But I want you to just kind of start thinking about how did you learn to manage your stress? What are some of the predominant ways that you manage your stress? And what are some of the ways that you would want to change how you manage your stress? So just planting that seed there. One of the things that can be helpful is checking in on this lovely stress cycle that we have here, which is very similar to a habit loop. Habit loop, again, it's how habits are created and how they're broken. And it allows you an opportunity to look at where you can intervene in that habit loop to help make or break a habit. Similar with this stress cycle that we see here. At the top, you have what is causing your stress. So looking at what is activating that stress response or what is bringing up thoughts that are making you more stressed. And then from there, looking at the physical response. So checking in with your body. What is happening in your body? Do you notice your heart rate starting to increase? Are you clenching your fist and not even knowing it? For me, I find my shoulders up by my ears sometimes, and I'm like, whoa, Nelly, okay. Like, we are very stressed right now. And so from there, you can then start to look at what are some of your behavioral responses to the experience of stress, to the physical experience of stress. So what are some of the typical ways that you tend to cope with stress? And we're going to do another fun, was this the right one? No, I got to go over to the next slide. Is it going to let me do it without changing the slide? Oh, shoot. Well, I had another fun one, but I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Let me try one more time. Okay, maybe. Ooh, maybe not so much. Ah, shoot. All right. Well, what I was going to ask is what are some of the ways that you cope with stress? And so as you're looking at, we'll look at what stress feels like to you. What are some of the things that you do to try to better manage that stress that you experience? For me, I already kind of shared, I tend to eat my feelings. So I am a stress eater. Good things that I will sometimes do is like stop and take deep breaths. Also, may pour myself a glass of wine at the end of the day. Not gonna lie, y'all, if it's been a really stressful, chaotic day, I may have a nice glass of sparkling wine to help cope with that. So what are some of the things that you do to cope with stress? And while you are working on that, I'm going to see if I can switch it on my slides here.
Are we writing in the chat or we are responding on?
Oh, yeah. If you feel comfortable writing in the chat, that would be awesome.
Okay, sure.
And then I'm going to see if I can get out of presenter mode and then switch this bad boy over. Reading and going for long walks and hikes. Binge watching TV shows, Laura. I'm there with you on that one. Yoga. Ooh, I love that. Centering and meditation practices. Yes. All right. So some of y'all got adaptive coping here. I love that. Awesome. All right. Let me get back to sharing because some of what you already shared are some of the things that we're going to touch on in our session today. Let me pop this bad boy back up. And the first thing that I would love for us to do is to take a mindful minute. So this is a really great activity that I love sharing with people because it literally only takes 1 minute, and it's a tool that you can turn back to whenever you find yourself in a stressful situation. And if you don't have any tools around you, it's still something that you can do because it relates to your breathing, and your breath goes everywhere with you, right? So what I would love for you to do is find like a nice, tall, comfortable position and like roll the shoulders down and back, maybe like bring the neck from side to side. Just allow yourself to kind of shimmy, shake, get comfortable. And then if you do feel comfortable and it's safe for you to do so, maybe allowing the eyes to close softly, and then just noticing your breathing in its natural rhythm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer for us for 60 seconds. And when I start that timer, I would love to invite you to start to lengthen your breath a little bit longer on the inhale and longer on the exhale, and just try to start taking some nice deep breaths all the way into the belly. And as you're doing that, counting each breath that you take. So each inhale and exhale, that's 1. Inhale, exhale, that's 2. And then for 1 minute, we're just going to focus on counting those deep breaths that we're taking. So as you're ready, finding that next inhale, and go ahead and begin your deep breathing and counting those breaths. Nice long, slow inhales, soft, full exhales. If you lose track, that's okay. Just pick up wherever you left off. And go ahead and find that last exhale. And just let your breathing return back to its natural rhythm. You had the eyes closed, maybe allowing them to open. And would love to know in the chat what that experience was like for you. To stop for just those 60 seconds, taking some deep breaths. If you want to share, and if you're kind of competitive, you can share how many breaths you got in the chat. I'm usually hanging around 7, and sometimes people are like, I got 4, and I'm like, dang it, I gotta build my lung capacity. And the reason that I love starting off with this practice in particular is, remember when we were talking about the physiological response of stress? One of the things that happens is our breathing rate starts to increase, right? And then our breathing rate and our heart rate and our blood pressure all start to rise. So out of those 3 things, I don't know about you, but I can't be like, hey Siri, set my beats per minute to 55. Like that's, I don't know, maybe technology is going there someday, but you can't control what your heart rate is at. You can't control what your blood pressure is at. But what you can do is you can have some sense of control over your breathing rate. And by slowing down and taking those intentional deep breaths, it's actually going to help activate that relaxation response, because when you breathe all the way down into the belly, and like, it is not glamorous, y'all, you get like prego belly sometimes, but you shouldn't care about how you look. When you take those deep belly breaths, it actually helps to kind of like tickle the vagus nerve, which runs along the back of the spine. And the vagus nerve is really heavily involved in activating that relaxation response. So when you're taking those slow, deep breaths, not only are you helping to support the activation of your relaxation response, but you're also indirectly starting to suppress that stress response by lowering the rate of the breathing, which is then going to help lower the rate of the heart. It's going to help bring your blood pressure down. So the breath is something that we do have control over. And it may sound silly to just be like, okay, I got to stop and take some deep breaths. But the more that you practice it, the more that it's going to better condition your mind and your body to help you recover from that stress that you're experiencing in that moment. All right, the next thing that we can do is we can stretch it out. So we can actually practice this here, just kind of watch the room around you, but even pairing your deep breathing with some stretching. So I like to kind of interlock my fingers as I take an inhale. And then as I exhale, rotate the palms out and then push the palms forward, maybe dropping my chin towards my chest. And then maybe finding an inhale, letting the fingers unlock, opening, drawing the elbows back and down, maybe like opening through the chest, maybe tilting the chin up a little bit, dropping the shoulders out of the ears. Stretching and releasing. So that can be helpful in even just paying attention to how your body is feeling in this moment. And like we said, tension can play a big part in what stress feels like. So if you can take some time to help release some of that stress, that is also going to be a great way to manage your stress. Lots of different stretches. I mean, you can play around with what feels best for you, what works best for you, the space that you have around you. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot, but it is going to be helpful because when we are under stress, our body does tend to tense up to react in that fight or flight status. So if we can teach ourselves how to help release some of that tension, it can promote better stress management. All right, and then I did start getting a little ahead of myself because I was talking about Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and I wanted to share this quote from an interview that she did because it does talk about how you can reframe the stress that you notice. So it talks about how when you think about your stress differently, it actually has a different impact on your body's response. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight is in the center paragraph, but what if you view them, the signs of stress, instead as signs that your body was energized and preparing you to meet this challenge? That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting you more oxygen to your brain. So again, this is looking at how we can think about stress as our friend versus the enemy. Because I know that there's those challenges out there that are like, join me for a stress-free challenge. And the truth is, you don't want to be completely free of stress because stress is what keeps you safe and alive. But we also don't want it to get to the point where our stress is just consuming us and taking us over. Stress is just part of us, but it can be very easy to fall into kind of this downward spiral of that stress and that overwhelm, feeling like it's consuming each and every part of your life. So trying to think about that experience of stress differently is one of the ways that you can kind of take that power back from the stress that you're under. All right, and some of you may be familiar with these grounding practices. I just wanted to quickly introduce these because again, it's something that is easy to take with you and you can do it wherever you are. So the first one, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this is basically just engaging your senses to the world around you. Because when you're feeling like you're, kind of drowning in your stress, it's very easy to get in your head, right? Which sometimes makes it worse because then you go on that what if spiral of anxiety and you like start to spiral and it's really hard to kind of get out of that. And that's where grounding can come in because when you're paying attention to the world around you. You're getting out of your head and into the moment. And in the moment is where you have more ability to take action and control of what's happening in your life. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is just a framework. You can play around with it in different ways. I like to take the approach of look around for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can feel, 2 things that you can, oh gosh, which one am I missing? We have taste. I like to save taste for, smell. 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. Because unless you're eating something, there might not be a whole lot that you can taste, but you can still get curious about it, right? You can still pay attention to it. So again, you can use that as just kind of a framework if you want to switch it up and do, if you're eating, maybe 5 things that you can taste, 4 things you can feel, right? So have some flexibility with these practices and experimenting with them to see what works best for you. Dropping anchor is about noticing your experiences, and usually this is going to relate to your thoughts and your feelings, because a lot of times when we are experiencing challenges in life, it can be very overwhelming and it kind of feels like a storm, right? Like you're stuck in a storm and you're like little paddle boat. And we're just kind of being tossed around by the waves, right? So dropping anchor is about learning how to anchor yourself through those storms. And that first thing is noticing what's happening in your mind, in your heart, and recognizing that those are just parts of you. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. They are parts of you. They are experiences that you're having. And so looking at them through more of like a time where you can kind of step back and look at them from a place of not being all wrapped up in them. So that's the first thing. Acknowledge your experience. The next thing that you want to do is connect with your body. Maybe you just like push your fingertips together and just notice that your fingertips are getting pressed together. Maybe you like grab your elbows, maybe you like wrap yourself in a great big hug, but just connecting with your body and noticing that you have control over your body. You can't control your thoughts and feelings, but you can control what happens with your body. And your body is around those thoughts and feelings, right? So you have this body that you can connect with that is basically kind of holding those experiences that you feel. And then the last part of dropping anchor is just engaging with the world around you. So again, just noticing to very fine detail what is around you to help you get out of your head and into the moment. So acknowledge your experience, connect with your body, and engage with your surroundings. That is what dropping anchor is. And part of that could even just be feeling into your feet. This is more of a simple practice to where you just like pay attention to how your feet feel against the ground, whether you're sitting, whether you're standing, and just really paying attention to that sense of stability and holding yourself secure in place and just trying to channel that same sense of security and stability to support yourself through a difficult time. So just feeling into your feet. You can like shift your body around. If you want to, any SpongeBob fans out there, you can bring it around town. Bring it around and notice how it feels between your weight shifting as you kind of bring the hips around. But just, again, paying attention to your experiences. And then the last one I wanted to share is progressive muscle relaxation, kind of similar to stretching it out, stretch and release. But with this one, you're going to create intentional tension in the body and then focus on the release of that tension. So we can actually practice this together here. If you want, you can just focus with your fist. I like to get my shoulders involved in this one because that's where I carry a lot of my tension. So with this one, you're going to take an inhale and you're going to squeeze as hard as you can without hurting yourself. Just squeeze as you're breathing in and holding for 3, 2, 1. And then as you exhale, release. And notice how the hands feel as you let the muscles relax, as you let the shoulders drop. Maybe there's some tingling there. Maybe there's a sense of warmth or a sense of cooling sensations. And again, just focusing on the release of that tension. And then you can practice that again. So as you inhale, squeezing up, holding nice and tight as you breathe in, holding for a few seconds in 3, 2, 1, and release and relax. And noticing how it feels different. Actually, fun fact, and I don't think I have one around with me. Oh, actually, yes, I do. The cat was playing with it. So one of Jackie's new favorite toys is my little muscle man of a stress ball here. And if you have a stress ball, which these are given out at conferences everywhere, right? Instead of maybe having a flex, it could be something veterinary related, but this is the one that I have to demo with. So with a stress ball, you might actually be using it wrong because a lot of people will just like angry squeeze the stress ball. And that might help to a certain extent, but actually these were created as a brief intervention of progressive muscle relaxation. So you're meant to squeeze it and hold it for a few seconds and then focus on the release of that tension. So there you go. Fun fact, you can share with your coworkers, tell the world, hey, do you know how to really use a stress ball? And they're not meant to throw at each other. I will say that too. I've seen that happen. Not what they're meant for or intended for, but it does happen. All right. Well, hopefully those strategies are helpful and kind of starting to think about what are some of the other things that you can do to manage your stress more proactively. And with those interventions that I wanted to share, I'm hoping that those are brief practices that you can squeeze in even when you don't get a full lunch break, maybe when you're in your car mentally preparing for the day or decompressing at the end of the day, because I know how crunched y'all are for time. And so really being able to find these practices that you can just kind of sprinkle in throughout your day that maybe you don't have time for a 30-minute or 60-minute yoga session, right? But you can give yourself a nice big stretch overhead, maybe a little lean, and finding those ways to find what works best for you. You'll notice that's a common theme because we're all different, right? But I wanted to include this little lovely list of healthy coping strategies so that maybe there's some things that you'll be able to take away and start introducing or reintroducing into your life. So sleep and stress kind of go hand in hand. When you're sleep deprived, you're more likely to be stressed the next day. When you're experiencing increased stress, you're more likely to have sleep problems, and then it creates a vicious cycle, right? So do your best to try to get some restful, healthy sleep. Try to take a break from the news and social media. Sure, there's like lots of cute puppies that I follow on Instagram, but sometimes I find myself into like the doom scroll side of social media. It just makes me feel very worse about the world. Moving your body is also a good one that we actually practiced here today. Try to create that space in your day to unwind and decompress. And it could even just look like 5 minutes, right? So finding those ways to be able to find those pockets of time to allow yourself a chance to recover from the stress that you're experiencing. Talking to others, I will caveat this with saying, talking to supportive others. There may be others in your life that actually bring you down and make you feel more stressed or worse about things. So finding others that are going to uplift you, help you to feel better instead of worse. Avoiding drugs and alcohol. They don't have a really great impact on our physical or mental health. But like I said, I do enjoy a glass of wine sometimes at the end of a long day, right? But when you look at it, alcohol is a depressant. So maybe it's helpful in that moment, not so much for the long run, right? Limiting caffeine intake. Again, caffeine is also a drug, most commonly used drug here in America. And caffeine is a stimulant. So kind of opposite of alcohol, right? But what ends up happening when you drink caffeine? Your heart rate starts to increase. It could feel a lot like anxiety and stress. So if you're already stressed, maybe just look at decreasing your caffeine a little bit. Asking for professional help, y'all, I am a big fan of therapy. I went through my grad program getting trained as a therapist, then made that shift into the health and well-being coaching side of things. But as a therapist, I went to therapy too. The one thing that I will say about this is there are some really bad therapists out there. So shop for a therapist that you are going to feel comfortable and safe talking to. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what type of therapeutic modality they're going to use. You don't feel comfortable and safe talking with them, you're not going to make the progress that you deserve. So it's a little bit more challenging to try to shop around for a therapist because We do have limits with employee assistance programs and things like that. But if you can, do your best to just find someone that you feel connected and safe with. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox for that. But creating a routine for yourself helps to create some sense of control and predictability in your day. So if you can, create like a wind down routine for yourself to help you decompress from stress, help you better prepare for sleep. Practicing mindfulness, some of y'all shared yoga, meditation practices. That is awesome. I used to be the biggest skeptic of mindfulness ever. I thought it was just about like some Buddhist monk levitating on a mountaintop, achieving like total nirvana, saying Om. Until I ended up with 2 stress-induced illnesses. One was hand, mouth, and foot disease, which is common in preschool children. And the other, 3 months later, was shingles, which is common in the elderly. And I was in my mid-20s, relatively healthy female. And my doctor goes, look, Melyssa, these are both stress-induced because your body should have been able to fight them off, but stress weakens your immune system, which made you more susceptible to contract these illnesses. I don't want to see what happens if you don't make changes to managing the stress that you're experiencing. So that for me was the wake-up call. And I was like, you know what? Everyone raves about this mindfulness stuff. Let me give it a try. First time I tried it, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And it doesn't work because I was practicing mindfulness the wrong way. I was trying to get competitive with myself and say, okay, I'm not going to have a single thought for the next 5 minutes. Ready? Start the timer. Here we go. Okay, oh, this isn't so bad. Wait, did I remember to pay my electric bill? Oh gosh, I should probably look into that. Oh my gosh, wait. Remember that time in 3rd grade where I embarrassed myself in front of my crush? Oh my God, that was so embarrassing. Wait, why am I having these thoughts? I'm supposed to, okay, I got to start the timer over again. 5 minutes, here we go. And it actually just ended up making me more frustrated, right? But that's not the purpose of mindfulness. You're not going to be able to turn off your thoughts. You're not going to be able to stop your mind from bringing up all of those different thoughts. So what you can do instead, and the purpose of mindfulness, is having that present moment awareness and being able to pay attention to when you get distracted and when your mind wanders, and noticing that in a way where it's like, oh, there goes my mind again, and then inviting it back in a soft and gentle way, being patient with yourself and kind with yourself, because that's what's going to end up building that mental muscle, right? You notice yourself getting distracted, you get to help refocus back to what you were paying attention to. Okay, I went off on a tangent with mindfulness. I could talk about it all day, but another good thing is spending time out in nature. So being outside in the sun, not only going to get you some vitamin D, but it does help you to just get away for a little bit, or away from stress, coworkers. There's actually a lot of studies that look at, the term is called nature bathing. Y'all keep your clothes on for this. It's just talking about getting out in nature and being out in a natural setting and allowing yourself to bathe in the sun. All right. But there's lots of science coming out to support that. And it even just feels good getting out in the sun, letting it hit your skin for a few minutes. And it is really effective in managing stress. Journaling, whether it's to process different thoughts and emotions or to help you feel inspired, or maybe focusing on what you're grateful for in your life. So there's lots of different iterations of journaling you could try. Eating a healthy snack. Y'all, food feeds your mood. So for me, I know I'm doing a lot of unlearning because I turned to like the carb-rich, sugar-filled, junky foods that just serve my emotional needs. But in the long run, again, going to make me feel worse. It's not going to help me have a better mood. So healthy snacks can actually help you to feel a little bit better. And then reaching out to a friend. So again, a friend that is going to help support you and uplift you. And then I just like to leave at the end, what else? What else could we do? I saw someone earlier said reading. Reading is a great one. Going for the long walks. Sometimes you do need that distraction of just like shutting your mind off and watching TV. That is what I live for with The Bachelor, just like my junk TV that I don't have to think about anything except for the drama playing out in front of me. Heather, playing video games, that's a good one too. So all of this to say, look for things that you enjoy. Play around with maybe some of these new strategies that you were introduced to today. So that way you can start to develop what I call your little checklist, right? Here it's a self-care. I like to call it a stress less checklist. So look for those things that you can do. Oh, crafting, that's a fun one too. Although it can be fun. Sometimes I get frustrated if it doesn't turn out like the Pinterest picture, but that's besides the point. So when you're looking at all of these different stress less strategies, try to think about what things can you do to support yourself in the green zone, right? Because even when you're feeling your best, you need to be practicing these skills, because since they are skills that you're building, you want them to stay strong. And the more that you practice, the more progress you're going to make over time, right? So I want you to ditch the practice makes perfect mentality and adopt a practice makes progress mentality. So basically what you're doing is helping to strength train your brain to help you better manage your stress. And then in the yellow and the orange and red zones, what are different things that you can do for yourself in those different spaces along the stress continuum to help support you in managing that stress? So what I would love to do, oh, I'm gonna have to look into that one, the Happy Color app. That sounds fun. Okay, thanks for that suggestion. See, I learned things from these webinars too. So when we are looking at putting into practice what it is that we're learning from these sessions, I wanted to leave you with the opportunity to set a SMART goal for yourself. So these are prompts that you can walk yourself through to focus on a specific action, so a behavior that you can do to manage the stress that you're under. So an example could be, I'm going to follow a guided meditation on the Insight Timer app for 5 minutes at 8 a.m. in the morning every workday to try to start the day off on the right foot, right? So that's the brief example of a SMART goal. Again, you will get these slides. I did start creating a digital library on the Insight Timer app of vet meditations. So try to do play on words there, but really trying to aim for creating practices that are less than 4 minutes so that you have that time in your day to be able to fit it in. And they're more focused on specific instances in which veterinary professionals can bring them into their everyday life. So wanted to share that. Again, you'll get a PDF copy of the slides, because the other thing that I wanted to offer is I have a 6-week program called Vetcom. And for those of you who are attending today and watching the replay, I did include a 50% off coupon code. So normally it's $44 for the 6-week program. So you can get it for $22. And it takes you into a lot more detail on how to use mindfulness practices to better manage stress. So in case that's something you're interested in, wanted to share that. I know we are a little bit over on time, so I wanted to leave my contact information in case anyone wanted to reach out separately. And I just wanted to also thank you for being here today and taking the time to share in this virtual space with us. And also major thanks to Digitail for allowing me to speak on this topic that I really enjoy. So thank you all so much. Be happy to open it up to any questions that y'all may have. And if there's no questions, if you could just do me a favor and drop in the chat what your biggest takeaway was. I always love looking at that too. Oh, and the QR code is my digital business card. I probably should have said that. Sorry, Heather, go for it. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, we love technology. I swear there's got to be something in the air though this week. I lost my power earlier and internet was down. Ooh, yeah, thanks for sharing that one. You just need a few seconds. Yep, just create a few seconds. You don't even have to do the whole mindful minute, y'all. You stop and take even like 2 to 3 deep breaths at a time. That can help you to downregulate that stress response.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you, Heather.
Oh, it's not my day with technology, but I did have
It
actually
happens to the
a
best of
question
us.
to ask you. There's been so
Yeah.
much good information that you've shared with everybody. But one thing that I was thinking is that a lot of the stress management techniques and like healthy living techniques, they kind of require some motivation, which I think
Mhm.
can be hard when you're in a period of high stress or depression. So I didn't know if you had any insight into how to get that motivation to put this into action.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that motivation is an emotion and it's a feeling state, which means it's very fickle. So it's not going to hang around. And what you can do instead is focus on taking action. Because while we can't control our thoughts or our feelings, we can control the choices that we make and the actions that we take. So, in those moments where we really find ourselves kind of stuck in a rut, just look at what is the first smallest step that you can take to support your well-being. And that could just look like taking those 2 to 3 deep breaths once a day. So trying to really focus on those small, realistic action steps for when you're really stuck in the thick of it. I'm always a huge fan of seeking out professional healthcare. So if you can work with a coach, work with a therapist, work with your healthcare provider, just to make sure that everything is working properly too, because sometimes we have underlying medical conditions that can affect our mental health that we might not know about. So always just trying to make sure that you're taking care of your whole person self by checking those boxes and then just focusing on those small action steps that you can take. And be kind with yourself through the process, y'all. Life can be hard. So don't beat yourself up even worse when you're going through a hard time. Try to comfort and support yourself like you would a good friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melyssa. I just wanted to say, I think that some people are looking to join now. So we're going to send out the recording. There was a time change recently, daylight savings time. So I think people are
Oh my
thinking
gosh, I
maybe
didn't
that
even
it
think
was,
about that.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it would be a problem, but just wanted to assure everybody that we are going to send out the recording so that those who did miss it due to the time change will get to watch it at home.